Hi, everyone. This is Reverend Kenneth Price, and this is Wednesday, October 29th, 5 p.m., and I'm here with Mary. And this
Yeah,
is our Wednesday Zoom call. We call this Real Talk because we are Course in Miracles students, and we are losing our minds, and we're going to try and make that humorous because the tiny mad, what is it, Mary? The tiny mad idea is when the Son of God remembered not to laugh. I
that's
host,
true.
yeah,
That's
well, it's
so
got to be
true.
true. I
There
like
has
that story.
been, uh, I haven't been on this call in a few weeks, and so I don't really know what's transpired too much, but um, I wanted to talk about jealousy.
Oh, good topic. I can't wait to get to the meme. Let's get going.
I have such a hard time with that, with jealousy, with not necessarily like what other people have. It's more of an attention kind of a thing. Just dumb little thing, just not even on a grand scale. It can be the smallest little thing that
No, they're
maybe,
they're not they're not dumb and they're not little. Keep going.
well, maybe it'll be I see how somebody else has raised their child or cultivated whatever. And I think, well, I was terrible at that. I didn't do that very well. I should have done that, or I should have done this, or um, somebody else gets, an idea. And instead of thinking, wow, that was a great idea, I think to myself, well, why didn't I come up with that idea? I really chastise myself a lot about different things.
You know why I was excited you brought this up? Because I went through that. Um, I think it was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I fell in love, and guess what came to the surface? Here I am,
Yeah.
Reverend Kenneth Price. I've been on this journey for decades, and here I am. I've studied the Course in Miracles. I've been to Chapala. I've done sacred plant medicine. On and on and on. Guess what? Boom, right there. Hello, darkness, my old friend.
I know. And now that I am looking into more of, sort of existential, metaphysical things like that, I think, okay, now where did this come from? Because is it, generational? Is it ancestral? Is it just this lifetime? Is it, you know,
Let me can I see if I can speed this up for you and kind of share with you to make it go quicker for you.
yeah.
Um, this has been the crux of all these essays I've been writing, and I don't take credit for it because Keith Kavanaugh finally was the one who got through to me.
Hmm.
Is to stop. It's like a scab. Every time I get a scab, I want to pick at it, and it won't heal that way.
Yeah,
And because you and I are bright, we want to figure it out, don't we?
we do. And that's, instead of just accepting all and everything about yourself and about everybody else, I think part of that is just conditioning. We go to school and we're taught to analyze things and we're taught to know things and rather than just accepting things for how they are. I don't know. I can't do that.
I can really, so that's why I got excited when you brought this up. All right, so 2 years ago, there's a lot of different names for jealousy. I think people have, one of them has a green-eyed monster attached to jealousy. That's pretty accurate. All right, so that's
Yeah.
when Ricky entered my life. Now, I've had a lot of ACIM practitioners say, "Oh, good, let's go get down and get to the belief. The belief in lack, the belief you separated from God." Well, I can't do that. When I'm
Right.
crawling on the floor, vomiting my guts out, my heart's ripped open. I can't go down looking. I was glad that it was very nice of that ACIM teacher. I'm sure her jealousy was of the mild variety, so she could probably. I
Mhm.
wasn't there. But here's what Ricky did for me, and what I can offer for this Zoom call. She she said it was part of my healing. She completely flipped the narrative. And that's what Jesus does in the Course in Miracles that most people, it's going to take them, decades of study to get. Jesus flips the narrative and says, it's coming up for healing. Not because we've done something wrong, not because we weren't good enough here, or not because we lack here. No, let's keep it real simple. Now, the stories aren't going to heal us. That's why I suggested we not pick at the scab. But if we can be with the feeling, that's the hard part. But that's why it's so simple, and most humans, detour it, is to be with the actual feelings. It hurts. Mine hurt.
It does. It really does hurt. And why is that? I mean, it hurts because on one hand, you feel like you're either, I don't know, being abandoned, being looked over. But at the same time, it hurts because I feel like I'm a bad person because I feel that way. You're not supposed to be jealous. You're not supposed to, you're supposed to be happy for other people. You're not supposed to be possessive about things, obsessive about things. And so it's sort of a double-edged sword because it's like, why am I mad at myself for feeling this way? I just feel this way.
Well, if I were Keith Kavanaugh, which who I'm not, maybe I can imitate an Irish accent.
Yeah.
He would take you straight. He would take you straight into it right now. I was listening to him. I had to do a crawl space estimate this morning around 11 a.m. So it's about a 7-mile drive. So I was listening to one of his recordings, and the same thing happened. A woman came on and she asked him a question, and she said, this happened, I'm feeling this way, and I'm feeling this way. And he stopped her. And he was able to bring her down, underneath the story. And I hope someday I'll be able to do that. Here's what I have to offer. I go through it too. And my practice is real simple. The more I practice this, the more I say it wasn't about, I'll have to change his name. It wasn't about Joe. 2 years ago, I've had enough metaphysics to know it wasn't about Joe.
Right.
So right there, there was no drama. I wasn't going to go and say, who were you out with last night? You didn't tell me where you went. I said, none of that crap. I was 56 years old. I didn't need to go down that avenue.
Right.
But it was still there. And that's the part where I'm glad I hold the symbol of minister. It took so much faith to be with the raw intense. I'm not saying I was going to, able to shed the story. I tried to pepper that story around the ACIM community, but kind of like you, I had enough metaphysics around me to know the story couldn't be true. But there's a fine line, Mary, because, and you've read my essays, sometimes we're still going to need to tell the story. And that's the fine line between a mystic and a therapist. And I don't know how to walk that line except intuitively. What I'm hearing from you is the same thing I went through, the common denominator. It's frustrating, it's painful, and you're crying. You're saying, there's got to be a better way.
And so now I'm somewhere in between that, like you said, I'm somewhere in between the therapist and the metaphysical thing where I want to tell my story, but I don't know who to tell it to.
Well, I can tell you who not to tell it to.
I'm sorry.
I can share who not to tell it to.
Who do I not tell it to?
Well, there was a woman in Mexico who will beat you over the head with a ruler
if you tell your story.
I had this wonderful teacher in Mexico. I loved her, and I had grievances. She knew that, she did it on purpose, but she could be loving and kind 1 minute. And the next minute, if I went into my story, she could get out the Zen stick.
Right.
You're going to find teachers like that, And I've had other teachers in Mexico. One of them, I met her at in the plaza, and I said, "Where are you going?" And she goes, "Oh, I'm going to go have dinner." And I said, "Can I join you?" And she said, "Yeah, as long as you don't tell me any of your stories."
She's not interested in that.
I said, oh, you've got good boundaries. How about a
Yeah.
margarita?
It's just a story. It is just a story, but we tell these same things. I mean, you try to let go.
Yeah, how's that? That's this. Let's talk about that. We're trying to let go. Remember what was the essay that I wrote? You read it because I know you commented. It was
The
pig
clouds.
mud wrestling. Remember that one? And remember, I wrote you that response. With the pig with the ego singlet that
Yeah,
said
the ego.
"Love you,
Yes.
Mary," and then in
Yes.
parentheses, "Just kidding."
Yeah, and I forget what my response was. I forget. I respond,
But Kenneth really
stupid things.
does.
But I sometimes have to reread those essays to really try to get to the crux of what, sometimes I have to really
Well,
consider what you're trying to say. And sometimes it resonates, sometimes I'm a little baffled by them, but um, they make you think. And when you speak in a different way, that's not necessarily ACIM, you know, jargon. Uh,
the message
People,
of ACIM is actually universal. I don't think a lot of people are ready to admit that this is simply a universal language, a universal message in a very unique language.
yeah,
Nobody else has delivered non-duality in Christian, Father, Son, Holy Ghost, vernacular.
no,
But this is just basically in a nutshell. He's just trying to tell us, no past, no future, stay in the present moment. But
mhm.
it's for ding dong intellectuals, which is you and I perfect. We're bright. Is that a blessing or a curse? Well, it depends who you ask.
Well, that right, exactly. And you'll analyze it to death. I do that. And it's like I sometimes it's right there in front of your face and you don't see it because it can't
I
possibly
know.
be that easy. You just have to make it harder than it is.
It's the reason all of us this what I can say is that thank goodness we're on this path because we have a solution. The human being is doomed. Even before AI, the human being is doomed. Uh,
Yeah.
but now other people are going to say, no, so now it's coming out of the closet. This is what the Course in Miracles is trying to get through to us. You're not human beings, you know,
Right.
and that's when all that jealousy came up 2 years ago, and as the jealousy died down, there were just something in line waiting up right next to it. Nothing's ever stopped. I just have to keep asking myself, who's the one getting jealous? Who's the one getting angry? I had another
Right.
teacher in Mexico who cut to the chase. He said, that's your spiritual practice. Who's the one?
Mm.
Keith Kavanaugh had to do it. It's just Muji's saying the same thing. Uh, and we just have to have enough faith. And it doesn't really, by this time, it doesn't take faith because we can't go back. By this time, people just won't want to hear my stories anymore. It's not like I
Right.
can't, it's not like I won't tell them, it's that nobody will listen anymore, which is a good thing. So I just
Right.
have to go off into take my walks or be in my definition of solitude. And I
Right.
have to ask myself that question. And it's starting to work. I noticed the other day, you know, because I have to listen, I have to keep all these mystics plugged. I have to mind train basically all day long. Calico said, do not get one thought away from God. And she said, if you get two thoughts away from God, it's red light. So she was very clear on that. But I finally got to a point where my nervous system calmed down enough to where I noticed a thought, and instead of biting like taking the fish bait, which is has been my unconscious behavior, it's like a hungry trout grabbing onto a fly. I I was slow enough and calm enough to notice the thought, and then immediately there I said, okay, that's a rain cloud. The sun is still shining. It's been covered up by a rain cloud, and I caught it. And that's got to be our practice. Whether it's jealousy, whether it's what other uncomfortable feeling comes our way, but we really are. I won't ever use the word control, but I would like to use the word authorship. Authorship over uh, our thoughts, because that's what Keith keeps telling me. And you and I are Course in Miracles students. These are not. It's one of the first early workbook lessons. These are not my real thoughts.
Right. Right.
Now,
And you have to sort of hover above yourself, you know, to observe it and say, what is that person doing? I'm like, this is all me. This is nobody else's fault. This is me. That's a hard pill to swallow.
it's hard, but it's necessary. You're talking to somebody who had to basically eat humble pie. Pema Chodron said it's like eating our own vomit. You know, my that said it's like eating a shit sandwich. It's actually a rite of passage.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
You don't
humbling.
want to. And I have grievances. I was talking to somebody the other day and I said, I have this grievance with somebody from childhood. I guess I just held on to it for 40 years. It's just silliness, really.
It's Takimi, continues to use the same word every time we talk. She calls it purification.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. It really is cleaning out the basement. I can't emphasize that enough. It's like the other essay that I wrote. I had quite a few come out this week because I haven't been to work for
Yes, you
7 days.
have.
Yeah, because my job finished. Actually, my job finished a week
I love
ago
the cloud
Monday.
one.
Oh, yeah, that's I love the color of light. But the other one was like, is there a drunk monkey in your head going bananas?
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
goes back to my 12-step days when they used to call it. They didn't call it ego. They called it the committee.
Mm,
And that's accurate because Keith
mm.
Kavanaugh calls it the crazy mad voice inside of our head talking to itself. So it's just basically the 12 steps on steroids. And I know you've been a 12-stepper before. It's just there's a committee of people chattering away up here.
Mostly for me, it's I just chastise myself to death, blame myself to death for everything. Everything. It could be
But
anything, and I
also
would blame myself.
notice that you and I are here on a Wednesday evening, and it's no accident because you're basically just telling my story. I'm hearing you because that's all been in my parable. Remember, when I always say there's a footprints in the sand behind me when two or more are gathered. So I think we need to really emphasize that because you and I are discussing this on a Wednesday evening, the healing is underway. We've already both, sent out the warning signal. We fired the rockets on the Titanic, and Carpathia, got the signal, and they're on their way, the lifeboats.
Yep. I guess that being human, we want an answer. We want a result. We want to know what's on the other side of it all. And for me, I keep thinking I can't live another 20 years like this. I don't want to.
Well, we're we're here to be happy. And again, there's a nuance there. Finally, Keith Cav was it Keith Cav? I don't know. I listened to some of the teachers. Finally said the human being can never be happy. That's a big spoiler alert. But even when you get to the point the human being can't be happy, it still brings us back to the same question. Who am I?
Right.
Because he says happy dream in the Course in Miracles, and he uses a word like peace and love. But the spoiler alert, but that's not for the human being.
Right.
One of the things that Keith helped me out with is I don't remember which Zoom call it was, but the message was very simple. He said, "You have no control over your thoughts," which that's not a victim statement. That was a surrender statement. And
Yeah.
I have a good example. What you just brought up is that the little kid inside of us, who
Mm-hmm.
after all these decades of spiritual work, metaphysical work, responsible adult, raising families, having a career, realizing we're right back where we started, frightened little
Right.
child. Now, but
Right.
that's a good thing because now the only thing left for us is surrender. Up until
Mhm.
now, we could still try and rearrange the chairs on the Titanic. Let's try this new age modality. Let's try this therapy. Let's try this road. But the beautiful thing about this conversation between you and I, Mary, is we're both in our 50s, and we're finally saying, I surrender. Nothing here works. Now,
Right.
now that
True.
is when I got to get my. That's when he enters the equation, because it does. Trust me, it does take a miracle, because it's
It
outside
does.
of time and space. But the miracle is that's the only thing that's going to work in this. And I get excited when I hear somebody say they're at their wits end. you know uh, the difference between you is I got a lot of people come to me at their wits end, and they're so distraught that I have to have, for duty of care, I have to send them, to call 988, because usually they're suicidal. But
Right.
if you can reach this point and not be suicidal, and have the courage to wave the white flag, and even if the suicidal ones, it's just that I can't take that because I'm not a psychologist. I don't have a
Right.
license. But if you have the bravery to walk into this surrender, this is the magic part. The surrender is the cocoon time. But so many people, that most spiritual people will try, they try everything to avoid the cocoon. They form entire spiritual communities to try and avoid the cocoon. And it's great.
Right.
They can do a lot of funding that way. But push comes into it, we do have to die to this. We
Hmm.
That's what I realized today. I said, I'm dying to Kenneth. But but I'm obviously, I'm certainly not going to take, my own physical life. But it does have to be a psychological death. And that's what you're describing to me in this Zoom call. I don't. You may not realize it, but that's what I'm hearing from you, is the psychological
No, it
death
is a psychological
underway.
death, and it's painful because you have this idea of yourself. You're intelligent, you're whatever. And I even told my husband, I said, that old person really has to die. And he said, does all of her have to die? I said,
At least your husband's got
kind
a
of.
sense of humor. Just something
Mhm.
better than I have now. I'm still rearranging the deck chairs. I really want to talk to people who are at the end and have to jump. I
Yeah.
and that's what I'm hearing from you. You're telling me, basically, in a nutshell, nothing here works. Now, what does he say? No order of difficulty in miracle. I'm not a Course in Miracles scholar. Something about hierarchy. You know, chocolate
Yeah.
cake.
There is no order of difficulty. Yeah.
Yeah, chocolate cake, heroin. Antidepressants, alcohol. Actually, it's all the same.
Gambling, sex, all
Gambling,
that stuff.
sex.
Yeah,
You know,
it is.
I often felt like all those homophobic Christians back in the 80s. I always felt like getting up in front of Melody Land and saying, "Do you like chocolate cake, sinner?" I never got the chance. Okay,
Yeah.
enough about my unforgiveness. Well, mostly, we started this call on jealousy, and it doesn't matter the form. Jealousy. What are the seven deadly sins? Pride, lust, envy, greed, and gluttony. Perfect.
I don't know.
Pick your five. Is it five deadly sins or seven deadly sins? I don't know.
Jealousy, seven, I think it's seven deadly sins. I grew up Catholic, went to Catholic school, and I still don't know. That's how much I really paid attention. I don't know.
Let me share with you a little bit what's going on with my week. I've been mine mine has always come back to family. I had the family, dissolved, over 30 years ago, and it has weighed heavily on me my entire life. Now, because I couldn't forgive, I carried that grievance for decades,
You couldn't
and
forgive, but did you also blame yourself for it?
of course I did. I blamed them and I blamed me.
Yeah.
Your fault, my fault, your fault. I mean, it was like a ping pong. Okay, so I've been on this path for years, and praying. I was praying my ass off, just like you're doing. You're sick and tired of being sick and tired. Well, I wrote that book, and it,
Mhm.
this is why I think grace. We need to add the word grace into this conversation because again, I don't know what happened. People, you could ask me, was it the ayahuasca? Was it the Course of Miracles? Was it Muji? Was it Byron Katie? I have no idea, except that I was just driving down the highway, and suddenly this realization hit me at age 58. By the way, that it wasn't about my father.
Right.
I
Right.
had to wait till 58 years old, and I didn't even plan it. I didn't try. I couldn't make it happen. I was just driving down the highway today, and this thought came into my. It wasn't even a thought. It was a knowing. Oh, that was never
Mm-hmm.
about your father. Well,
Right. Right. How
took
about
took me
that?
almost 60 years to figure that one out, and I didn't. But it just came out of nowhere. So, you know,
There's your miracle.
there it is. It was just a flash moment. And later in the day, I got pissed off at my father again. But
I know.
it's those moments, those reference points. Now that and you've had one too, because otherwise we wouldn't be having this conversation. If you thought that voice in your head was speaking the truth, you'd be busy telling me your stories right now, but you're not. You're sitting there saying, my mind is speaking this, it can't be true. My mind is saying this, it can't be true. So, you're walking across a bridge. And
Yeah.
the closer you get to the other side, you get bursts of light like I had this afternoon. Like, it wasn't about your father. Ah,
Right.
remember remember those cartoons we used to watch as a kid? Remember Popeye?
Oh, heck yeah. Olive oil.
That's all I can stand, and I can't stand no more.
And no
Time
more.
for me to
Yeah.
me eats me spinach. Because I
Yeah.
mean, it does get to a precipice where you know it's not because I'm spiritual, it's not because I'm wise, it's because I simply can't do it anymore. That's what I was telling Ricky on the phone this morning. I finally said, don't call me wise, don't call me spiritual, don't call me advanced, but you can call me tired.
Yeah.
And and it's
Exhausted.
in it's in that exhaustion. I truly feel that a lot of us, these spiritual communities make so much money for people trying to wake up out of the dream. And I'm
Yeah.
starting to kind of roll my eyes and get a chuckle out of it. Although, bless their hearts. I want to wake up out of the dream. Well,
Hmm.
I don't know about. I mean, yeah, and I tried. I tried it for decades to wake up. Good luck. It cost me my entire retirement, which I find really comical now, because it really took for me, like I was just telling you. I was just driving down the highway, and that light bulb moment arrived. Oh, it was never about your father. Well, that was going to arrive on my 58th year, whether or not I was a spiritual person, whether I probably could have been a heroin addict, and it still would have arrived on my 58th year. So,
Right.
I mean, that's kind of laughable when you think about it. It was gonna, the script is written.
That's where we signed up for this shit. That's all. That's all I can say. Sorry.
No,
We
don't
definitely
apologize.
did.
No,
We
it's
definitely
it's.
did. And tell me though, if you when you had that moment of clarity, did that affect anything in your body in terms of like your nervous system? Did you feel a little bit more at peace? Did you feel something maybe release?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question because that's an important question. And that would be the first one. How did it make me feel? And what it felt like. Let's see if I could even find words for it. I Listen. I've been having pictures of my father up here. He's been gone for 21 years. I haven't seen him. And last time I saw him was 1989, and he's been living
Wow.
up here. Pictures. So I'm driving down the highway, and that familiar picture comes across my head. But this is what changed. When the picture came across, that movie screen in my head, I felt I felt a true appreciation. I felt like I missed him. Man, I've missed you.
So that was
Now,
love.
that's it. Because for the past, 3 decades, when that picture goes across my head, it's like, how dare you do that to a young man? Who do you think you
Yeah.
were? You lied,
Right.
you betrayed, you blackmailed. And now, and that's all the ego just saying, oh boy, we got him, we got him, we got him. I'm not saying, there wasn't trauma. Listen, if there's someone who's been to trauma therapy, I put all my trauma therapists, I put all their kids through college. But truly, on my 58th year, that same came across, same picture, and I forgave him.
Yeah.
So your question is, how did it make me feel? It was like I finally took a deep breath. It's like I've been holding my breath for 3 decades, and I
You
could
lost a little
finally
bit of weight there,
exhale.
didn't you? Yeah.
Lost a little bit of weight.
Yeah.
The monkey let go. The monkey has been on my back.
Yeah.
So, I don't know what to tell people. You can do all the spiritual work, and you need to do spiritual work, metaphysical work, but that moment of surrender is really, that's the moment of grace, and it will happen when it's supposed to happen. The script
Right.
is written.
Suffering is necessary. It really is.
Good. Let's get that on tape too. We've got so many mystics out there who say, you don't need to suffer. You don't need to suffer. And you know what? At the ultimate truth, of course, we don't need to suffer. But spoiler alert, 98% of us do. And right now, that's what it takes for most of us. I in a perfect world, maybe in a few more generations, that won't be a truth anymore. But for those of us who are the first runners across that bridge, the first waivers, guess what? There is going to be suffering.
Right. And if you
and
can get to, like you did, you forgave your father, and that was a tremendous act of love.
I think AI agrees with us. That's why AI ultimately wants to do it.
AI wants to take our bodies away.
I don't know. I don't know.
I don't
We have
know.
about 5 to 10 years
There's so
before the
much out
thing.
there about that stuff too.
We
Do
have
you
about
ever
five to
watch,
ten years.
I'm sorry?
We have about 5 to 10 years before the singularity, so we got time to wake up still.
Oh my gosh, I won't even understand it. Do you ever watch Robert E. Grant?
Yeah,
Yeah, he's very interesting.
he's
His
brilliant.
take on AI and everything, his take on life in general, and his is more all about the mathematics behind everything. So, when you start watching all this different stuff and trying to integrate it into whatever path you're going toward, it gets very confusing.
Yeah, I don't proselytize, my areas of research because it's too much for most people. But well, it's I need with you I can, but I have to kind of dumb myself down for most people, and that's
You
that's
have to
that's not
what?
coming from. I have to dumb myself down for most people.
Yeah, yeah.
It's because it wouldn't be kind to myself or them to share that, but um, I
It's
I
hard because you are you understand a lot more than most people.
it's a blessing and a curse. People say, "Oh, I wish I were as smart as you." I said, "No, you don't." Or I wish I were mentally gifted. Be careful what you ask for.
Well, true. It's
It
a lonely place sometimes.
extremely lonely. It took me years before I realized that it wasn't about me. It was when I finally stood up, and it was perfect. I finally stood up and said, "Wait a minute. You should be listening to me."
Hmm.
That they all sat down, and that's when they stopped. They were waiting for me to stand up for myself, to for me to eat my spinach. I was so used to playing small that they actually did me a
That's
favor.
exactly
They
right.
they pushed me into my own voice.
Yeah.
I, you
Yeah.
know
And
But
which
it
is
was for, well, it was for a reason I was playing small. I had so much violence, so many violent thoughts that I
Mhm.
purposefully was numbing those violent thoughts. Took a lot of work to get honest about the violent voices up here before I
Mhm.
could, move through the trauma. This is hard
But
work.
you have those thoughts. I've had those thoughts too. Kind of push them away because you think, oh, well, I'm a sinner. I think like, even thinking those
Yeah.
thoughts, you're a sinner, you're a bad person. You're
You know, Dakini Wild just did she just posted um, a Miracles Cafe podcast with Dove Fishman. And they talked about violent thoughts, murderous thoughts.
Mhm.
Those were the exact words. And and it,
Mhm.
I before I even finished the YouTube, I wrote in the comments. I said, "Thank God, Dakini, someone's talking about the murderous thoughts."
Yeah,
She even messaged me before she posted it, and she said, "Kenneth, we're going to start talk. We're going to talk. Dove and I are going to talk about something. We're going to post it on YouTube, and it's going to ruffle some feathers." Now, I told her, I said, Dakini, if you don't ruffle feathers, you're not doing your job.
you're not doing right.
And
Right.
I said, you need to go outside of the guardrails of these safe metaphysical conversations where all light, where all love. We have murderous thoughts, and let's put
Right.
that onto the altar. Well, she did. You know what? I couldn't have commented quick enough. And as soon as she read the comment, then she said, I'm going to post this comment elsewhere. She said, because
Yeah.
that's how I feel. Let's talk about. I don't want to talk about the love and the light and the chakras and the auras. That's
Right.
fine. If you want to, that's fine. I want to talk about the murderous thoughts because we all have them. And if you tell me you don't have them, you're full of and you're denial. You have murderous thoughts.
Mhm.
And let's put that on the table because that's where the
And whatever,
transformations. Yes.
those are all in different forms too, maybe you want someone else to fail, maybe you want, whatever. They're
I mean,
all murderous thoughts.
look at Facebook. Everyone is. Listen, I did not vote for Donald Trump. I do not like Donald Trump. And of course but that's not the point. Everyone who has a murderous thought gets to project it onto Donald Trump. They get
Right.
to. So you look at Facebook. Everyone, they hate him. Well, actually, he's a real jerk and a real and but that's not why it's not about him. Those murderous,
No.
that's what Keith has been trying to tell us. The murderous thoughts came first, and then the projection comes second.
You got to project it onto somebody, be your closest ally.
Called a scapegoat,
Yeah.
called a
Yep.
black sheep.
Yep.
You know, my family had an illness. It was called denial, and
Yeah.
they had to project it. If you have an illness, you have to project it. If it's a
Right.
physical illness, you project it onto your body or somebody else.
Mhm.
It had nothing to do with truth.
Yeah.
It's how wars
Yeah.
get started.
That's
But
exactly
oh,
right. And
what you and I are doing here on a Wednesday evening is we're unwinding that war because the war is inside. This conversation is unwinding the war inside. Because
absolutely.
there's three in this conversation, and Jesus is doing what we can't. I can't. He can't. I think I'll let him. It's where I am too. You've heard me say it before. I don't want to hear about, you know, I don't want to talk to a spiritual person. I want to talk to an honest person. Because spiritual people are it's just more identity. But an honest person is on the tarmac for transformation. So I just want to leave you with that picture that my Al-Anon sponsor gave me 35 years ago. She just handed me a picture and it just said, "Expect a miracle."
Back to
How does
miracle.
that sound? All right, so this is Reverend Kenneth Price, and I've been here the last hour with Mary. And Mary, we have unpacked some really deep stuff. I am so
Truly.
thrilled. And I'm gonna post this on YouTube, and I was thinking of titling it Jealousy, but I've got to review this archive because we talked about
Yeah.
many things. So if you're watching this on YouTube, Leave your comments below. We meet here every 5 p.m. Eastern time. So God bless.
Wednesday, not Friday.
Sorry, 5 p.m.
Wednesday.
Wednesday. So much love.